Welcome to the Earning Freedom Podcast. I am Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com and prisonprofessor.com. Today I'm going to be speaking about publishing books from federal prison. Those of you who know something about my story know that I published a number of books in federal prison, but that wasn't always the case. I didn't start my journey in federal prison as a published author, but I positioned myself to do so. And I want to tell you how publishing books really transformed my life, because I'm absolutely confident that any individual who applies himself can emerge from prison successfully if he has the right plan, if he knows what he is doing, if he's got the right guidance to empower him and keep that strength going as those days turn into weeks, those weeks turn into months, those months turn into years, and for some, as those years turn into decades. So I'm going to take you back to let you know a little bit about my journey, let you know a little bit about how I positioned myself to become a published author, and I am going to show you how you can do the same, because if you're going into federal prison, that is the time to begin thinking about how you can emerge successfully. So again, I want you to visit michaelsantos.com, prisonprofessor.com, so that you can learn I am not one of these guys who's full of happy talk telling you what to do when they've never done it themselves. I served 9,500 days in prisons of every security level, and there is nothing about the system that I don't know how to overcome, how to master. If I did it once, maybe it's luck. If I did it twice, maybe it's super lucky. But the reality is, I did it while going through 26 years in prison. I succeeded in every prison where I was held, and I create these free podcasts and these free webinars and these free videos so that I can show you how you can do it too. If you want the free content, awesome. Get it every day. I produce new content every day. If you want the more detailed how to do things on your own, I would suggest you visit prisonprofessor.com. If you want personal consulting, contact me. I can help you, and I know that I can help you get through this journey successfully, because I'm going to show you how I did it. It all began for me back in 1987 when I was 23 years old. I had started selling cocaine when I was 21 years old. It resulted in me getting a 45-year prison sentence. I didn't know what I was going to do when I began. In fact, when I got arrested, the only thing I was thinking about is getting out of jail. I was so distraught and so really in a difficult, challenging situation mentally. I felt those walls crushing in. I felt, the pain of confinement, the pain of being separated from the people I love and the people who loved me. And I didn't really know how I was going to get through this. But fortunately, for those of you who don't know, I was exposed to the work of Socrates. And when I read that story of Socrates, who also was in a jail cell, he had been sentenced to death and he was waiting for his execution date. But rather than allowing the trauma of that experience to derail his spirits, it emboldened him, and it made him develop a stronger commitment to emerge from this journey with his dignity intact as an individual who was going to die for the beliefs that he lived by. He was going to die for principles. And when he had an opportunity to escape his jail cell, instead of taking it, he chose instead to drink the hemlock and to go down with his dignity intact. And when I read that book, I can tell you I had to set that philosophy book on my chest. I at that time in my life, I didn't know what philosophy was. I didn't know how to spell it. Certainly didn't know anything about Socrates. But when I read that story, I felt as if this is what I need to do. I need to figure out a way to serve this sentence with my dignity intact. I need to figure out a way to reconcile with society, to come back strong. And so while I was in that jail cell, that's exactly what I started to contemplate. I started to introspect. I started to think, how am I going to do this? And those thoughts led me to think of people just like you, people who are watching this video right now or listening to this podcast right now. I began thinking about, what can I do to connect with society so that people will see me and judge me for the decisions I made going forward rather than the bad decisions I made that put me in prison. And that made all of the difference. Because when I started contemplating that, I kind of developed an avatar. I developed a vision of the types of people I wanted to get together, I wanted to know. I knew that if I didn't do that, I would always be judged for the bad decisions I made when I was 20. And that wasn't going to fly. That was not going to help me through the journey. If I just allowed the circumstances of my past to dictate my future, what would life have become for me? I mean, I was facing a sentence of life without the possibility of parole, and yet I had to find a way to sustain a high level of energy and discipline every single day. And I had to think, what is life going to be like for me when I get out of this prison experience? By contemplating that back then, back in 1987, I started to develop this foresight of what types of people would, what law-abiding citizens or community leaders, what they would be thinking about me back then at the earliest stages of my journey. And I didn't want them seeing me as a coke trafficker. I wanted them seeing me as a man who knew how to face challenge, knew how to face struggle, and yet overcome it, yet not get crippled by it. So if you're crippled by any type of struggle or challenge right now, I would encourage you, embrace this path. Figure out a way to get from where you are today to where you want to go tomorrow, and then reverse engineer your path. That's all that I did. It's no secret. It's no magic pill. It's simply work. It is simply this pattern of visualizing success, creating a plan that will take you from where you are today to where you want to go tomorrow, and then executing that plan every single day. That's what got me through the journey. And that's what allowed me to go from entering prison as an uneducated, goof-off kid in my early 20s and emerging the man that I wanted to become. This is what I'd love for you to do. In my case, it became very simple. The more I thought about who the people I wanted to associate with when I got out, I just started to figure out, what can I do to position myself in such a way that will help them see me as something better. And I came across with this three-pronged plan, because the people that I would want to meet, who were they? Well, initially it was going to be the probation officer that supervised me upon my release. It was going to be the employer who I wanted to hire me or to extend some type of a business opportunity. It was going to be people who I would want to extend me credit, people who I would want to open opportunities for me as I moved through this journey. And so the vision of those people, that became my avatar. Those became the people that I was determined to try and prove worthy of supporting, or prove worthy of earning their trust, of earning their liberty. And I will say that those thoughts, they just got me thinking, well, what would I have to do to earn their respect? What would I have to do to prove worthy of their attention? And that led me to this three-pronged plan. Well, those people, they would expect me or want me to educate myself. If I could educate myself, I figured, well, then the chances were that they would see that I wanted to be a good citizen, that I wanted to be a law-abiding citizen, that I wanted to live a life of meaning and relevance with my dignity intact. And so that became very important to me, to educate myself in such a way that would persuade other people to believe in me. Second is I would have to figure out a way to contribute to society. And at that earliest stage of my journey, I didn't know how I was going to do it. I mean, I was living inside of a county jail. I hadn't even been sentenced yet. I was facing life without parole. But in spite of that, I wanted to say, I am going to come through this journey successfully. I am going to find a way to connect with society. And it was that vision that empowered me further. And it made me think, okay, I've got to be thinking about this. How am I going to contribute to society while I'm in prison? And I didn't come up with that answer right away, but eventually it became publishing, and I'll tell you about that. The third prong of my three-pronged strategy was I would have to find a way to contribute to society, or rather, I would have to find a way to build a strong support network. I wanted people to believe in me. I didn't know who those people were, and those people didn't know who I was, but I wanted to become something more than my prison environment. And so it was that vision that just, got me through it. It kept me going and saying, okay, this is going to be my path. I'm right now in the depths of a labyrinth. I'm so deep underwater that I don't know how I'm going to get out, but some kind of way I'm going to find it. I'm going to climb one step at a time. And that three-pronged path was going to help me through the journey. It was going to help me because I would be working to educate myself. I would be working to contribute to society. I would be working to build a support network. And if I did that, well, all of a sudden I wasn't a prisoner anymore. I was controlling my own destiny. I was, that statue of the self-made man just starting in there as a prisoner and carving my way into becoming the person that I wanted to become. But I was only 23 years old. It was 1987. To put that in perspective, you gotta fast forward how much time I served. I served 26 years. Today, I'm filming this video on May the 6th, 2015. And if somebody were going to embrace or embark upon this same pattern, this same journey, that individual would have to sustain a high level of energy and discipline and continue with it. As the weeks turn into months, the months turn into years, the years turn into decades, and he wouldn't be getting out of here until 2041. That's the 26 years that I served. And that's why I know that if I can get through this, just think what you can do. You can do anything you want to do if you embark upon your challenges in this disciplined, deliberate way. And that's what really got me through the journey. So then I get sentenced, and the judge sentences me to 45 years. And oh my God, I didn't even know what that meant when I was 23 years old to serve a 45-year sentence. But I get shackled in chains, and I get transferred from the Pierce County Jail in Tacoma, Washington, where I go from other county jails on vans and buses and airplanes that the United States Marshal transported me across country until I got into the United States Penitentiary in Atlanta. And when I got there and I saw those foreboding walls and I saw, this monolithic structure that's built of stone that is just built to last forever. And I'm thinking to myself, man, that's where I'm going, into this really wretched environment that really seems exquisitely designed to extinguish hope. And I'm saying, I'm going to get through this. Why? Because I had my three-pronged plan. I knew what I was going to do. I was going to work to educate myself. I was going to work to contribute to society. And I was going to work to build a support network, even if I was locked inside of a high-security United States penitentiary. And so what happens next? I get into that environment, and I start trying to really crystallize what this means. So with regard to educating myself, I just think about you. What do you think about an individual who says he wants to educate himself? How would you measure success? That's what I had to do. And I just come across with this definition based on what I'm projecting you would expect. I say, well, people in society, they would identify somebody as being educated if he has a college degree. So I started to obsess on how am I going to get a university degree because I don't have any money and I had been a lousy student in school, but I figure out a way to crack that code. And that's what gives me some power. That's what gives me some strength. Then I start contemplating, a little time goes by, how am I going to contribute to society? And for me, that answer became, well, I don't know what I'm going to do in prison, but I've got to think to contribute on the other side of these walls. I've got to transcend these walls. And how can I do that? Well, I can do that with something like this, because this is all that I had, was a ballpoint pen, a white piece of paper, and an iron will to succeed. And so it was that strategy that got me going. So I said, I'm going to figure out a way to publish. Now that is a bit of a fantastic goal when you're 23 years old and you've never written a coherent sentence, to think that you're going to be able to publish something. But that's what I was thinking. I'm going to find a way to publish at some point. And 3 was, how am I going to build a support network? I have got to find law-abiding citizens, community leaders, the types of people I would like to associate with if I were able to transcend this environment. And I said, how am I going to bring them into my life? I need to find 10 people, 10 law-abiding citizens, 10 community leaders who are going to come into my life and support me and develop a relationship with me and have a vested interest in my success, not only through prison, but upon my release. Because I believed that if I did this, if I worked to educate myself, as defined by getting a university degree, if I contributed to society, as defined by publishing, if I found people, law-abiding citizens, to believe in me and have a vested interest in my success, well then, quite possibly, I would have a better outcome from this experience than anybody else would have expected. And that became my plan. But since I had 26 years to serve, because I later learned that on a 45-year sentence, I would have to serve 26 years, I couldn't contemplate that. I mean, I was only 23 years old. Even 26 years seemed, an extraordinarily long length of time. So I focused on the first 10 years. So I said, in the first 10 years of my journey, I'm going to some kind of way get a university degree. In the first 10 years of my journey, I am going to develop the credentials and the skill set that will allow me to publish. Number 3, I'm going to find those 10 people that I want to believe in me within my first 10 years. And so that path is what got me to become a published author. First, I got my undergraduate degree in 1992 during my 4th year of incarceration. It was actually my 3rd year since I embarked upon the educational journey, but during my first year, I was in trial and going through some traumatic experiences and introspection and trying to find my way. It wasn't until I got to the penitentiary, after I'd been in for a year, that I started putting pen to paper and figuring out a way how to get an education, despite my not having any money and despite my not having been a good student in high school. So if you want to learn how I did that, I would recommend that you read my books. I would recommend that you visit my website at prisonprofessor.com or michaelsantos.com, and you see if you can figure it out on your own, or you might want to retain me so I can show you how to do it for yourself. And I do that through personal consulting. But that was the first strategy. After I got my undergraduate degree, I wanted to continue on with school, wanted to get a law degree actually, but I had some challenges because I was incarcerated. And law schools said, we'd like to consider you when you got out of prison, but we can't enroll you into a legal law program that would lead to a law degree while you're incarcerated, because the American Bar Association prohibits that. They require people to study in the community of scholars, not in the community of felons, where I was. But one of the universities, Hofstra in New York, suggested that perhaps they could waive the graduate records examination and waive the residency requirement and admit me on a probationary period if I wanted to, give that a shot toward earning a master's degree. And of course, I was just thrilled to have this opportunity because, a master's degree was better than a bachelor's degree, and it would allow me to continue on this journey of educating myself, really exceeding my initial goal of getting 1 university degree. I could get 2. And they asked what I would like to study. And I wanted to study the prison system. I wanted to understand how the prison system operated, because I believed there was a great social injustice in our country incarcerating so many people. And I wanted to bring out improvements to this system. So I said I wanted to study the prison system, and so we structured a course that would allow me to learn about prisons and learn about the most successful way of serving time. And I wrote a number of stories, interviewed thousands of people. And then as I completed my coursework toward my master's degree, I began publishing these pieces first of all, in peer-reviewed journals, then in newspapers. Then I built a strong support network, and a lot of my mentors were authors of books on prisons, and they invited me to contribute, articles for their books and then chapters for their books. And then I had an invitation to begin publishing my own books. And I'll tell you about that after I talk a little bit more about my 3rd prong of my approach, which is building a support network. You see, by educating myself and by publishing, I started to build a much wider support network. So I was really just executing this plan of educating myself, of building a support network, and of contributing to society through publishing. All of this worked in harmony. And you know something magical that happened throughout all of this? By doing it, I empowered myself through the journey. And that's what I would suggest that you do. If you are going into the prison system, empower yourself through the journey. Don't allow the journey to define you, the prison's experience to define you. Rather, define yourself by the way that you choose to serve this sentence. If you pursue that path of visualizing success, of creating a plan and of executing that plan every single day, you will empower yourself. You will feel stronger. You will hold your head high. You will have your dignity. You will earn back the trust and respect of the people you care about. And you will overcome this phenomenon of anybody who's been a felon, of having a Google, dictate the rest of your life, a Google search, because of all the bad publicity out there. You want to overcome that stuff? You got to take action. That's what I became a master of doing. I did it in every prison where I served my sentence. And through the courses I teach, I show you how you can do the same. If you Google my name, Michael Santos, see what comes up. I mean, I dominate every space of Google under my name, and everything is positive. Everything is expressing this commitment to a pursuit of excellence. Everything is committing transparency and inviting you, judge me for the way that I responded to a difficult situation, not for the stupid decisions I made during the recklessness of youth when I was 20 years old and saw Tony Montana and decided to pursue a career in trafficking and cocaine. I want to show you that regardless of what you've done, you can overcome it. You can live a life of meaning and relevance. And so this was the path that worked for me, pursuing that three-pronged plan. Now I'll talk a little bit more in depth about how I became a published author and how that allowed me to really transform my life while I was incarcerated. It enabled me to really developed a very strong support network. It enabled me to feel as if I were contributing to society because, thousands of people, tens of thousands of people were reading my work and learning more about the prison system and learning more about how to emerge from it successfully. And, I eventually found the love of my life through this work and got married in a prison visiting room and nurtured that marriage through my final 10 years of imprisonment. And the revenues that I generated from publishing, they supported my wife. They enabled me to return to society with more than $100,000 in the bank, ready to function and thrive. And that's what I'd love to see happen for every individual who is listening to my podcast, the Earning Freedom Podcast, who is visiting my website at michaelsantos.com or prisonprofessor.com, or who retains me to work with them on a one-on-one basis as a consultant so that they too can emerge successfully after a entanglement with the criminal justice system. Again, back to publishing. I had a lot of mentors in prison that I willed into my life through the work that I did, through the disciplined, deliberate pursuit of excellence that is well documented. Mentors started believing in me. And one of those mentors, one of the first ones was Professor George Cole. He was the dean at the University of Connecticut, and he was also on the committee that admitted me into the University of Connecticut to work toward earning my PhD. He was one of the leading textbook writers, and George invited me to begin publishing with him. And so he introduced me to his editor, her name is, Sabre Horn. She was then at Wadsworth. She's now with the Department of Justice. And she offered me a publishing contract, and that led to my first book, which is about prison. You can look it up on Amazon. It's used in universities across the country. We published that book in 2006. Then I reached out to another one of my mentors, who was Professor Marilyn McShane. She was then at the University of Houston, but she was also on the editorial board at Greenwood Prager. And because I had a relationship with her in the sense that I was already contributing to some of her writings, I just reached out to her and asked her if she would consider a book proposal. And she did, and they offered me a contract. And that brought my second book to market, which was called Profiles from Prison. Now, I'll have you know, I wrote all of those manuscripts with nothing more than a pen on an unlined sheet of typing paper, because the prisons at that time, of course, didn't allow me to use typewriters for publishing manuscripts. So had to do it all by hand, not a problem, empowered me every day, figured out that you deal with the world as it exists rather than as you would like it to be. But once I published those two books, my support network really grew. I had a life inside of prison. I was already I think I was in my 17th or 18th year in prison. And through that, I met my wife, Carol. She helped me. She became a liaison to me. And I told her, I really want to write a book for a mainstream audience. And so I just did some research. I found how the process worked, and I knew that I needed a literary agent. But by that time, I already had 2 publishing credentials. I had 2 books that were, rather successful, selling tens of thousands of copies in universities across the country, and I could cite those as references. So I reached out and told my story to publishers, or rather to literary agents. I wrote letters to about 100 different literary agents. I received favorable responses, as I recall, from about 12. And of those 12, I chose to work with one. His name was, who was my agent? I can't believe this. I just forgot his name. I just blanked out. I just do all these impromptu interviews, but I forgot the name of my literary agents. I'll publish it later. It'll probably come to me in a second. But I reached out to him, and he was very successful in getting me a deal relatively quickly. I would say within 2 weeks, he had me a deal with St. Martin's Press, and that led to a book that I wrote, probably my most widely distributed book, called Inside: Life Behind Bars in America. It's a very graphic look at the prison system. Had a rather substantial distribution. There are tens of thousands of that book, of that copy in print. I think it's in its 7th or 8th printing right now. It's not only used in universities, but because the book was reviewed by the New York Times Sunday Book Review and the Los Angeles Times Book Review, it got a rather large distribution with regard to just general nonfiction readers. In fact, it was also reviewed in Kirkus Reviews and a lot of book reviews. It had dozens, if not hundreds, of book reviews. So had a very large distribution. I was very pleased with that. I earned a considerable amount of financial resources while I was incarcerated from publishing, but it also gave me an enormous level of credibility. Not only did it expose me through that writing that I meet my wife, but then I wrote a number of other books while I was incarcerated. The most notable, or my favorite book, is called Earning Freedom, which I've been building a brand around. That really tells the story of how I was able to conquer 26 years in prison. I think the full title of that book is Earning Freedom: Conquering a 45-Year Prison Sentence. And anybody who adheres to this strategy and plan can do the same thing. You can face struggle, create a plan, execute that plan, and come out on the other side of it with your dignity intact, ready to function as a law-abiding American, a contributing citizen, leading a life of meaning and relevance. In fact, within 3 weeks of concluding my obligation to the Bureau of Prisons, 26 years, which I just finished on August the 12th of 2013, less than 3 weeks later, I was an adjunct professor at San Francisco State University, where I taught for a year. I taught 2 semesters there. My course was called The Architecture of Incarceration. I'll probably do a podcast soon on the general thesis of that course, why I taught it. But all of this should show you that if a man can face a 45-year prison sentence, walk in there as a foolish, reckless adolescent, and emerge with a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, publishing dozens of books, and I mean dozens of books. I published, I think, 7 under my name, Michael Santos. You can just check Amazon and you'll see them. I also published more than a dozen books for other people that I was coaching and advising as they went through the prison system. They'd come into prison as white-collar guys, and I really suggested to them that they need to start controlling their own narrative and write their stories. A lot of them didn't have a skill set as a writer, so that's how I supported myself, as I would write their books or ghostwrite their books and help them tell their story and help them really start repositioning themselves and building a brand. And I wrote more than a dozen books that way, earned more than $100,000 while I was incarcerated through that type of work. And I can tell you how I did that without violating any prison rules. And I can tell you how you can do the same. It doesn't happen by accident. It requires a disciplined, deliberate path. But to the individual who makes the commitment, to the individual who truly says, I am going to emerge from this experience much stronger than ever before, that individual is not serving time at all. That individual has found a way to reclaim his or her dignity. That individual has found a way to connect with society, to live a life of meaning and relevance. And that's what I strive to teach others. If you'd like to learn that, then I would really welcome you to contact me. You can take the free information on Earning Freedom podcasts. You can take the free information that I make available at michaelsantos.com. You can take the very inexpensive lesson plans that I make available at prisonprofessor.com. But if you want one-on-one guidance from somebody who has not mastered success in one prison or served a year in jail, but rather mastered every prison where he was held, then I'm your guy. I'm Michael Santos with michaelsantos.com. You can reach me at michaelsantos.com. You can reach me at michael@prisonprofessor.com. You can reach me any number of ways. I would encourage you, do your due diligence. If you're looking for somebody to guide you through the journey, check me out. Compare and contrast. Look at the people who validate me. Look at the news media that has validated me. Look at the facts and the reality that I can help you. And I will. So if you're interested, contact me. I'm Michael at michaelsantos.com. You can reach me. I'm the easiest person in the world to find. I am 100% transparent, and I am here to improve the outcomes of America's criminal justice system, and that means improving the outcomes for you. Thank you for listening to the Earning Freedom Podcast. Thank you for watching this video if you're on YouTube. I will be back tomorrow with more inspiring messages on how you can empower and grow through challenge, whatever that challenge may be. Thank you.